Hello, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started. We have an international speaker. Thank you for those here in West Virginia and our partners who have joined us later in the day, 4:30. It is the early day for our speaker. And so it's always exciting to have an international topic. There's a lot of parallels in our topic today being employment and particularly in tourism, giving West Virginia's background. Before we get started, I do want to introduce everyone to the series and why we're all here. So this is the Ability Grand Rounds that's sponsored by the West Virginia University of Excellence, Center of Excellence in Disabilities. This is something that is provided monthly. We've started several years ago, but this particular series started in the fall of 2025. Happy 2026 to everyone. And Emily's going to get us started in terms of our January presentation. So before that, closed captioning is provided. So if you need that, it is an option at the bottom of your screen. If you need any assistance, let me know. There is a chat function, and I'll be monitoring the chat. There is also a certificate of attendance that's available. Please put that in the chat as well, and I will write that down to remind myself to send that to you after the presentation. We've all been on Zoom several times or for many years since COVID or before, but just in case, please mute your line. Although we encourage discussion and questions, you can put that in the chat or raise your hand, any of those functions, and we will save time at the end for those. Before we get started, if you can put your name and affiliation in the chat just so we can get an idea of who's joining us today. If you feel comfortable, use your camera. But if not, we completely understand. If you're in the car, moving in between meetings, that's fine. And with that, we will get started. I will say the QR code that's on the left, if you're able to put your phone up to that, that will take you to these slides as well as the evaluation. If you're not able to do that, I'll post the evaluation link in the chat. We appreciate your feedback. This makes the series stronger as we go. With that, I'm going to introduce our speaker. Emily Liu joins us from Queensland University of Technology. She's a research fellow there. She's also a PhD candidate. And we will follow her and cheer her on as she finishes that huge milestone. Today, again, she's talking about workers with disability in the tourism industry. And with that, I'll turn it over to Emily. Thank you, Emily, for joining us.
Thank you very much, Leslie. Let me quickly share my screen. So everyone, Leslie, can you see the screen?
Yes.
Perfect, yeah. Happy 2026, everyone. Thank you, Professor Leslie, for the introduction and warm welcome. It's my great honor to share my PhD research with everyone today. My name is Siqi, and you can call me Emily. Just a little bit about myself. Currently, as Leslie said, I'm a research fellow at Queensland University of Technology in Australia, and I'm also a PhD scholar at Griffith University, Australia. And my PhD thesis is under examination now. Hopefully, it will come back soon. Fingers crossed. And my research passion is about disability studies, inclusive employment, and creative methodologies. Today, we're going to focus on two main areas. And first of all, I would like to share my key findings in PhD research around disability employment in tourism and hospitality industry. And then we will focus more a little bit about my research reflexivity during the research conduct with workers with disability. Let's get started. Here is a little background in Australia here. So as we all know, in 2023's data from World Health Organization, people with disability account for an estimated 1.3 billion individuals. That roughly about 1 in 6 of us. And in Australia alone here, 21.4% of people are living with disability. That counted as 1 in 5 of us. And among those with disability, only 60.5% of Australians with disability are in the labor force. That compares to 84.9% of people without disability. So why this PhD research? In terms of the COVID-19, as we all familiar with, so the labor shortage has been intensified, especially post-pandemic period. And people with disability are started to recognize as valuable and unique human resources here in Australia. And by including genuine people with disability into the workplace is the achievement of sustainable tourism. And we have to acknowledge that the long-term marginalization in employment for many, many people with disability, and even though they are employed, many of them has been showing in the research that they are only surviving and not thriving. So they face systematic barriers to career progression. So here we go. Here is the PhD research. I conducted a research which explores the conditions that empower people with disability to thrive in the tourism and hospitality workforce. In terms of that, I employed a research method of Photovoice. It is a participatory action research that research participants take or collected photo to capture their understanding of the research topic. In my PhD research, I worked with 13 workers with disability. They all have different work experience in the tourism and hospitality sector. For example, some work in a cafe as a barista, or some worked in a museum as a design assistant. In order to empower them during the research process, I did not follow the existing definition of thriving at work, nor follow the traditional research method of solely verbal-based interview format, such as I ask them questions and they answer. Instead, they had the autonomy and decision-making power to define and determine what thriving at work means to them from their perspective through photo taking and narration writing. As a result, they emerged with not just participants, but also they were co-researchers in my research process. Here is just a little bit taste of the hundreds of photos collected and shared by them. And now let's dive into the key findings of my PhD research. As you know, we all have research objectives to address. So the first research objective is to explore how people with disability understand thriving at work from their own perspective. And there are three key themes emerged: vitality, learning, and dignity. While the second research objective of examining with them about how thriving at work can be fostered. Also, three major themes came out of that research objectives: feeling safe, feeling included, positive and collaborative problem solving. So the first theme of vitality is talking about participants' struggle to maintain the energy required for tourism's fast-paced work environment. On the screen, you can see a photo taken by Jessie. It shows a small herd of deer cross a river in a national park. Jessie shared, I feel like I relate a lot to the deer that furthest to the right. While the others have already crossed the river, this one is still leaping into the first bit of water. To me, that's symbolic of feeling like I'm lagging behind my coworkers in a fast-paced environment. And the second theme is about learning. This represents participants' desire for growth, but special treatment from supervisors, though well-intended, often ended up limiting their opportunities for career advancement. Let's take a moment for this broken egg. Jordan shared this photo of a broken egg, a powerful metaphor used by several participants. Many described how disability is often perceived as a delicate eggshell that's easy to crack. This perception leads to a kind of discomfort in the workplace. One participant explained, due to the fear, supervisors behave like they are working on an eggshell. Out of the fear of being offensive, what ends up happening is special treatment, where constructive one-on-one feedback is avoided completely. And let's turn attention to the dignity, our third theme. Now take a photo at this photo from Emma. It's a simple image, just her work suit, but the story behind it is really meaningful. Emma shared, I'm often compared to other autistic people, usually children, but I'm a 29-year-old woman with a sincere passion for tourism. Her words echo a powerful theme that came up again and again in the research: put human first before disability. Participants spoke about how true respect comes when people accept who they are. And the fourth theme is about feeling safe. Let's turn into the focus of safety. For many participants, the decisive point of disclosing their disability came down to one thing. Do I feel safe enough to do so? Sophie shared this photo of her penny collection, using it as a symbol for the emotional cost of disclosure. She explained, when I disclose my disability to ask for accommodation, it often opens the door to intimidate medical questions from coworkers. And when those questions keep coming, they add up. It becomes a significant mental load for me. So the penny collection depicted the idiom of if I have a penny for every single event happens. And another photo of sharing is about the physical safety. It is stressed by many participants. This photo, shared by Joy, shows her bandaged legs after a long shift. She told me, now imagine finishing your shifts not just tired, but injured, and knowing it might happen again tomorrow. In a sector like tourism, where multitasking is the norm, participants call a simple but powerful change. Match expectation to people's abilities and make roles clear so no one pays for their job with their health. And let's focus on the inclusion, the crucial role supervisors play. On screen is a photo by Grace, 2 years side by side. She explains, supervisors often shape how inclusive a place feels. When somebody speaks up, they need to listen, not laugh them off. Think for a moment, have you ever spoken up and been dismissed? How did that feel? Aiden experienced it firsthand. I told my supervisor that I'd been bullied as a kid. He replied by saying everyone needs to be bullied to toughen up. That response gave him PTSD, and he didn't know if he can speak up again. Those stories remind us that inclusion isn't just policy, it's everyday conversation. Supervisors set a tone by truly listening and validating each voice. So this is the final theme. It's about positive and collaborative problem solving. People with disability aren't just asking for adjustments. They are often the ones offering smart, creative solutions. Take Grace, for example. She has sensory sensitivities, so her supervisor assumes she doesn't like or won't support high sensory exhibition displays. But Grace said, one of my favorite artworks has bright, flashing lights, even though I cannot physically see them. She went on to design this fictional exhibition plan, as you can see on the screen. She said, this exhibition plan incorporates both low and high sensory elements, so everyone can be included to see their favorite art piece. If you are more interested in knowing more about the theoretical part as our time constraint today, please feel free to find it online. It is published now in Annals of Tourism Research. It's an open access. If you cannot get access to it, please, I'm very happy to send it through emails with you guys. As I previously mentioned, it is a participatory action research. So the action component is achieved through a multisensory exhibition I hosted last June 2025 at Griffith University Gallery Room. The purpose was to voice their needs and concerns about disability employment in the tourism and hospitality and open up opportunities to be seen by the policy makers and practitioners for positive change in the long term. This exhibition was designed in collaboration with my research participants. They decided collectively what to share with the public. As you can see on the screen, it was a multi-sensory exhibition experience for the audience, as the purpose was not for them to just come and see and go, but immerse themselves in feeling what research participants really want them to feel during their work encounters. For example, um, The photo of the bandaged leg showing on the screen, as I previously shared, we want the audience to feel the same way as the research participants showcased. So we put the 6 kilo dumbbell, this one, the pink one. So the audience had to lift them up for 10 seconds. They feel tired before they can sit on this comfort chair. So it's actually showcasing the feeling of what the research participant felt during their during their work encounters before. So there are a couple of photos. People are engaging with the photos of the exhibition display, and it was really great experience for people who came. Right, let's turn our focus into my research reflexivity. Before I delve into the process of research reflexivity, it is important for me to acknowledge my research positionality. As a researcher, we often say our position in relation to our research participants. So I'm a Chinese female scholar who receives higher education in Australian institution without the lived experience of disability. In that, I have to acknowledge I enjoy many privileges in terms of higher education, institutional resources, authority, and expert status by virtue of our association with institution of higher education. While my research goal is to empower people with disability, I have to acknowledge the problematic in that the notion of empowerment still plays in a position of authority that I supposed to know what it means to be empowered, instead of putting the decision-making power to my research participants to be empowered by themselves. So this is the problematic. And I can never know the lived experience of disability, but I commit myself to be an ally for the disability community, and I always learn from them. In terms of that, I apply the philosophical autonomy logic of nothingness. It actually comes from the Japanese Kyoto School of Philosophy of nothingness. Nothingness, by the literal meaning, could be the void or the absence. But in this case, it's not total negation of self or objectivity. It's about detaching from ego self as a researcher who I just said enjoy many privileges. It has to be detached from those privileges, as we say, it's the ego, to collaborate sincerely with our research participants. So the key is to from learning to unlearning. And I'm going to dive deeper into this using my example as a case. So if you feel still confused, don't worry, I will help you guys understand that a bit more. Okay, so when I began my PhD research on the disability workforce, it was around 3.5 years ago. I was a complete outsider to the disability community in Australia. I was advised to take a top-down approach, consulting experts and organizations in the field. But I quickly realized that none of those had lived experience of working with disclosed disability. Early on, I was overly confident, and I even wrote in my journal, people with disability must be very pleased to hear my research and eager to work with me. Looking back, that was the example of self-referentiality, assuming my perspective was enough without centering theirs. And my unlearning. So that's the key. My unlearning began in the very first interview. One participant who worked in a restaurant shared story that felt ordinary too familiar. I started to doubt that if their experience was research worthy. I asked a question like, do you notice different treatment from your employers? They pushed back, asking why I was framed that question that way. The moment shifted everything. I reflected in my journal. Why did I expect their experience to be different? Because I was treating them differently. I realized my biases were shaping the research, so I changed my approach. I let go of my expectation as a researcher and let participants lead the conversation. So follow-up interviews became more natural, more respectful. And the last step came with a deeper reflection. I wrote, I'm still outsider. I cannot represent their voices. But what else can I do in addition to research to understand their experiences better? This led me to volunteer, supporting young people with disability at work. So instead of just listening to their stories, I witnessed their daily challenges firsthand and their experience with me during their work encounters. And for the first time, I felt I wasn't just researching, I was truly understanding. Through this reflexive journey, although it's really brief, I do have a lot of those epiphany moments that I didn't have time to share with you today, but we can bring that during our Q&A session. And through this reflexive journey, I moved from a top-down approach to shared learning, from assumptions to true engagement with them. So that's all about it. I hope you enjoyed to some point, and thank you all for being part of today's sharing. And I want to share that there's no expert. Let us always learn from each other. Thank you very much, and off to you, Leslie.
Thank you. That was wonderful. I appreciate it. Let's go ahead and open it up for some questions or comments.
Yeah, I'm also seeing the chat as well.
I'll dive in to say, so your findings were really interesting. I love the philosophy that you just shared with us at the end of this, because that reflection isn't often shared with research
Mm,
presentations, but it's very important based on,
mm.
what you just showed. Do you think that someone goes through that process each time they do a research study, or, once you've developed that awareness, you continue to grow? What would you say to that?
That's a good question. Thank you, Leslie. I think that's the both perspective needs to take into consideration. So first of all, every time they do the research, especially when researcher from a privileged status, from privileged position, we have to acknowledge that. And to research with people from underprivileged status, from marginalized group, we have to acknowledge every time that we do the research, and we always come up with a new reflexivity, new reflection. So you're right, we have to go through that philosophy every time when we do the research. And the second is, of course, we grow. So every time we do the research, we grow, we learn a lot, we learn from the community, and we can apply that knowledge learning into every time we do the new research. So I think it's from both perspective, yes.
I love it. I wish we could do it on a major scale for particularly for individuals, or a lot of individuals with that disabilities, to have that awareness. Could you
Mm,
speak? Maybe not everyone on here is familiar with the photo voice
mm.
process. Would you mind to give a little bit more on that? How that's done?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So, photo voice, by its definition, is basically giving the camera, or let the research participant use their own camera to take or collect photos to document their understanding of the research topic. So in my case, they took or collected a lot of photos to show their work experience. As you can see, a lot of photos they shared to define what thriving at work means to them. And this is a whole systematic process. It's not just about like interview, or not just like a one-off thing. So it's actually it took like 1 year to get it done through the whole process. So first of all, when we have all the participants, usually like 5 to 6 to start off, we had an introduction session to say like what the photo was about, and my role, and also what the research participants' role. I always acknowledge that they're the expert in their own experience. So they have the power to say what they want to share and what they have to share. So I'm not actually control this process myself. I'm actually facilitating. And then after the introduction session, they were giving a like a guide sheets So this also suggested by reference group. So just for you guys understanding, I had a reference group which consists of 3 existing workers with disability who have plenty of work experience and who also are good advocate in their space, such as inclusion and accessibility. And we actually had a pilot study of the Photovoice to start off, and they told me a lot of suggestions, like you need to come up with a guide sheets which help the actual research participant to guide them through what they need to do. So in these guide sheets, there are 3 questions, like 3 really brief questions, and they have the space to insert the photos. This question was mainly about the research itself, like what they think about the thriving at work means, and how does this photo convey that meaning, and what do they think what can be done to empower them to thrive through this photo. So these are the 3 questions, and then they were giving like 1 to 2 months depending on their availability, for them to develop these guide sheets, for them to insert like almost like 10 photos each person, and then they came back and we organize as a focus group or one-on-one interview, depends on their availability and their preferences, to discuss all those photos and the things they really want to share with us. And also we collaboratively to come up with the themes together. This is important in the research because usually, and a lot of feminist and indigenous research always criticize that although you give the voice to the research participants, by the end of the data analysis, you still control what has to be said and also what come up with a wider audience in the academic publication. I echo with that. So I didn't really do the analysis myself. I collaborated with my research participant to see what they want to analyze about. Of course, I have to acknowledge that this is a really tedious process for them as well. So we did it really flexibly, like instead of asking them to come up with all the analysis and come up with all the codes, second order codes. As a research team, I initially come up with all the codes and I send them the member. We went through the member check-in process. I send all the initial summary of those codes and let them to check and confirm, like, does that reflect your thoughts, or is there any thing that you would like to change? And then it's kind of like an iterative process of us collaboration together. Yeah, so that's basically about the photo voice. And by the end of the day, we collaborated to design the exhibition as I showed before. And that's displayed with a wider audience. So we invited policymakers, practitioners in the tourism and hospitality workplace, and also the researchers and also people with lived experience of disability to come together to see those photos and to talk together and to share the dialogue of how we can do better in the space to facilitate a future change in the long term. So that's basically the whole process of the photo voice. I hope that makes sense.
No, thank you for that. And there was a question, Bill asked the age group. Was there an
Yeah,
age range that you set, or was that open?
it was open. So basically, if they're in the labor force in Australia, is from age of 15 to 64. So, however, my participant they voluntarily sign up, usually around the age of 25 to 38. Yeah.
Perfect. All right. Any other questions? And then you have Faith. Um, you have some thoughts about your presentation, some thank yous for you to
Mhm.
have.
Thank you very much, Faith.
Where do you think you're going to go next? Are you going to stay within the
Right.
disability realm, or are you going to go elsewhere?
Definitely, definitely. The from the 3.5 year study, I figured out that in the tourism and hospitality space, it was still niche. And in my next step, I hope to broaden my context to outside tourism and hospitality. but still, I'm really passionate in the tourism, in the disability employment in general. So I would like to broaden my context, broaden my scope while still in the main topic of disability and employment space. Yeah.
Well, wonderful. Well, good luck with that and with your PhD. We'll be cheering on you on from across the pond.
Definitely, yeah. I think it will come back soon, February, and I'm hoping to get
Oh,
my PhD degree early this year. So very exciting.
well, let us know. Please let us know as you celebrate. That
Yeah,
would be great.
yeah.
Any other questions before we head out? Okay, hearing none. Thank you so much for sharing your work. We really appreciated all learning about, again, the philosophy and your approach to this and methodology. It's been great. If
Mhm.
anyone has time, I did put the evaluation link in the chat. Please fill that out and give us some feedback. And I put the information that it'll ask you for the title or presenter and the date. And then let me know if you need a certificate of attendance. So, with that housekeeping out of the way, I hope everyone has a nice evening and morning, Emily. And I'll see you soon. See you in February.
See ya. Thank you so much. Thank you, Leslie. Thank you, everyone, for coming.
Take
Bye.
care.